Resources Committee. Welcome everyone to the Programmes and Resources Committee for Friday the 26th of January 2024. And it's quite late in January, but it's the first time I've been here since Christmas, so Happy New Year everybody. Let's move into the agenda. The first item is apologies for absence. We have absences recorded from Jean Warmby, and Ken Smith will be here, but he's running late. He's got a puncture, but he will turn up at some stage, so he's sent us apologies in the meantime. There's a new procedure in terms of us recording our attendance, and we're not reading out names and people saying they're here or not. There will be there's a sheet coming round here where we'd like you to sign and then pass it on if you haven't done so. I'll just do my name there. So if you could pass that round, Ruth, thank you very much. So if we could go on to item number 2, which is minutes of the previous meeting held on the 1st of December 2023. Does anyone have any issues with the minutes or any points of accuracy they'd like noted? Okay, if not, could I have a mover? Thank you, Charles and Andrew Gregory seconds. Approving the minutes. Can we have a show of hands to approve the minutes, please? Everyone in favour? Anyone against? Any abstentions? Thank you. That's the minutes from the 1st of December approved. We have no urgent business, although you could say that nature recovery and climate change is urgent business, but within the confines of what it means in this meeting, there is no urgent business. We haven't been notified of any public participation. The other change to process is item 5, whereas instead of asking people for their declarations of interest on any of the items as they recorded their attendance verbally, we're now asking in item 5 if any members have any disclosable pecuniary, personal or prejudicial interests they may have in relation to any of the items on the agenda. If so, could you please raise your hand and tell us now, or forever hold your silence. Thank you. There's no declarations of interest recorded. Thank you. If we could go on to item number 6, we are going to go slower now through the items because we're getting to the items for decision. Item number 6 is the landscape and nature recovery aim overview. Just to remind members that one of the objectives and remits of programmes and resources is the programmes side, and this is where we look at one of the 4 themes from the management plan at our meetings annually, and it's the turn of landscape and nature recovery. So we've allowed 30 minutes for this item. We do have a recommendation to approve, but the recommendation is largely to sort of note the work that is going on, but it gives members an opportunity to understand what's going on behind the scenes, as it were, in terms of this activity. And we don't record here the KPIs and progress on objectives against the management plan. We're really sort of probing more the detail and understanding what's happening within this aim. So I'm going to hand over to Sue Fletcher, who's our Head of Landscapes and Engagement, to take us through a short presentation of some of the things this area has been achieving and progressing in, and she'll be introducing other officers to support her in that. And at the end of that, we've got plenty of time for questions. Sue, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So, hello, members all. I'd like to introduce, just in case you haven't met them before, Sarah Bird, who is our Nature Recovery Officer, who's also leading the Environmental Land Management Test and Trial that we're doing at the moment, and also Rebecca Newman, who is the Farming in Protected Landscape, commonly known as FIPL, Programme Manager. So, you've got the report. There's a lot going on. So it's quite light touch detail. We haven't included anything where there have been separate reports about that. But what we did want to do was just highlight a few key areas of issues or in fact and achievements. So Sarah's going to cover in a moment nature recovery in terms of our Peak District Nature Recovery Plan, which will be coming to authority in March, we hope, for members to approve the final draft. She's going to touch on local nature recoveries and that connect strategies in terms of that connection, but also biodiversity net gains. We've also got Brian here from a planning perspective for that. In terms of farming and protected landscapes, FIPL, as you know, this time we've got extra funding, and also an additional year. So initially it was a 3-year programme, now it's a 4-year programme, and there will in fact be a report that comes to authority in February seeking to accept that money and also to continue the temporary suspension of standing orders so that we have this efficient delivery of FIPL funding through one system, which was an issue for those that were back here in July 21, I think. I'm just going to mention future of FIPL. So FIPL's done really, really well. It's very well thought of. There's a formal independent interim evaluation. Farmers like it, DEFRA like it. However, although the learnings are definitely being taken forward into the further development of the detail for the environmental land management schemes, we're not sure if FIPL is going to continue. The commitment and the delivery through the engagement officers, Rebecca and her team, for example, here, is well recognised, but again, at the moment we're facing a potential cliff edge at the end of March 2025, and that will impact on getting this extra money out. It's quite a big ask now, biggest amount of money in the last year, which is at the most a 9-month year, not a full year. The classic situation. And then Rebecca's going to showcase another range of really interesting examples for you. So I'm going to hand over to Sarah, and she'll take you through the nature recovery aspects. Thank you, Sarah. There you go.
Thank you, Sue. Hello, everybody. So you'll be familiar with the AIM 2 in the National Park Management Plan around landscape and nature recovery, the Peak District National Park being a resilient landscape in which nature, beauty and cultural heritage are significantly enhanced. And within that objective 4, to be a place where nature recovers and biodiversity flourishes. So we've been working on that target to implement our One Peak District Nature Recovery Plan. So about 2 years ago, we set up a steering group to take forward the idea of writing a nature recovery plan. It includes all those organisations that you can see there. Plus then we added in Chatsworth, and we also have farmer representation on that steering group as well. So we've worked with the steering group and with others to develop a series of principles for the plan. So working within current parameters in terms of policy and strategic sort of frameworks, and where the thinking is at the moment in terms of conservation, enhancing nature recovery within the context of the climate and biodiversity crises, whilst also trying to instigate that change that's needed to be able to enable nature recovery. So we've taken learnings from a whole series of projects and programmes, from our 30 plus years of farm advisors that have been working in the Peak District with our farmers, landowners and managers, our Land Managers Forum, which meets approximately twice a year, the previous environmental land management test that we ran from 2019 to 2021. We've had some nature recovery specific farmer and land manager workshops, taking the learnings that Sue just mentioned from the Farming in Protected Landscapes programme, and our past and ongoing work with partners, including a consultation on the plan that was sent out to key stakeholders last year. So we want the plan to be a future look in terms of what we need to see happen to enable nature recovery. We want there to be something in there for everybody. And the plan will continuously evolve and adapt to incorporate updated policies, updated thinking and language, as well as responding to our changing climate. So through that series of works that was on the previous slide, we've identified 8 areas of challenge or barriers that people on the ground face in terms of trying to deliver nature recovery. Number 5, money, we know is a big one, but it's not the only one, and it includes things like the complications that tenancies add. We have quite a sort of a range in terms of IT skills, access to data and technology, access to broadband, things like that. So we've taken those 8 challenge areas and developed them into 10 themes for the Nature Recovery Plan, which you can see on the screen there. We've gone in a sort of non-traditional structure as to what you might expect from a plan of this type, and that's purely to try and address those challenges that people have told us that they're facing. So we have habitat-based themes, so things like trees and moorland. And then we also have themes to try and address some of those more complex issues around economics, advice and development. So, as Sue mentioned, the hope is that the plan will come to authority in March. It's currently with the steering group for a sort of final comments, but hopefully that will be the case. And then we hope to go live with the plan in April with a summary document, an introductory video, and hopefully a launch event at some point in early summer. One of the reasons why we started looking at producing one nature recovery plan for the Peak District in the first place was because of the announcement about local nature recovery strategies. So local nature recovery strategies will be a series of spatial strategies. They'll cover the whole country and they are primarily county based. So in the Peak District we will have 6 local nature recovery strategies. I've been leading on that work and the engagement with the responsible authorities. So it will be sort of up to them to have the final say, but we do have lots of opportunity to contribute sort of our thoughts, but there are lots of meetings and things happening, and most of them are in the very first initial stages of doing local nature recovery strategies. The idea is that local nature recovery strategies will be finished by March 2025. That's the ambition of DEFRA. And obviously we've just had the announcement about biodiversity net gain. Currently that is the only link between local nature recovery strategies and wider policy. But we do expect something in the near future around what the potential link between local nature recovery strategies and the environmental land management scheme might be. So just to quickly touch on that biodiversity net gain announcement from about a week ago. So biodiversity net gain, an expectation of 10% uplift in a biodiversity baseline. 12th of February it will become mandatory for major developments, so that's 10 plus houses or developments over half a hectare. On the 12th of April it will become mandatory for small sites, so 1 plus houses and most types of commercial development. There are still a lot of unanswered questions for us as the planning authority in terms of supply and demand, conservation covenants that will secure off-site biodiversity net gain, and our own internal validation process. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Rebecca?
Shuffling round. How are we moving them on, Sarah? Are you doing it with that?
I was just pressing the down button.
Okay, so I'm talking to you about farming in protected landscapes. The first 2 or 3 slides are just really a reminder about the programme, and then I'm going to go on and look at 3 examples based on the national character areas. So this is the slide that we've used all the way through. It's the first slide that we show in all the local assessment panels. And just a reminder here that we're delivering 4 FIPL themes. So climate, nature, people and place. And we're delivering all 4 of the National Park Management Plan aims, including 9 of the 11 objectives. We've got 315 projects. Actually, I think it might be 323 now, maybe a few more. Projects under £10,000 are approved internally, and then projects over £10,000 are approved by a panel. And that's our panel representation there. So you lot as members are represented on the panel by Ginny Priestley, Sue represents the officers. And then we have a whole range of other organisations, and really critically, we have 3 farmers who represent the 3 national character areas, so the White Peak, the Dark Peak and the South West Peak, but also the NFU and the CLA. Sue's mentioned the budget. That's the budget as it is. So, as she implied, we've got this enormous challenge for this year of getting over £2,300,000 out of the door by the end of March 2025. And if you take on board the fact that all of us as officers lose our jobs on the 31st of March, that means it has to be out of the door. So there's the challenge, obviously, of finishing those projects, processing the payments, getting the money out. In terms of the officers here, so we've got 4 FIPL advisors, which is the equivalent of 3 full-time equivalents, 2 FIPL administrators now. This has only recently increased to this amount. And then we have support from all over the authority. You can imagine these are legal documents we're producing, so there's support from legal. We process thousands of payments. So the input from finance is obviously really important. And then there's input from the rangers, from the cultural heritage specialists, from the ecologists, so throughout the authority. These again are some slides that we show regularly to the panel. So on the right, this is the agreements and the outcomes. It's important, this is the proposed outcomes, so this is what the applicant reckons they're going to deliver. This isn't very easy to see, I'm sorry. So the bar on the left is climate, then nature, then people, and then place. And this is the number of agreements and the number of outcomes they reckon they're going to hit. And then the pie chart on the left, again, this is unreadable, but it's the principle here that's important. The grey bit is the amount of money that's going directly to farmers. And then the sort of, this bit is the farmer land manager collaborations. So that yellow bit and the grey bit is the bit that's going directly to farmers. The rest of it, and I won't break it down, is going to the National Park Authority directly for the National Park, but more frequently going to the National Park Authority acting on behalf of other landowners. It's going to the NGOs, it's going to parish councils, little community groups, all of those sort of organisations that are more tenuous as far as the farming community would see as actual land managers or farmers. And really important, because one of the challenges at the beginning, or one of the things we were challenged on, was, is this money actually going to farmers? And I think you can see from this, it clearly is going to farmers. And then another slide that we regularly compile. This shows the distribution of FIPL projects across the national park. And that bluey bit at the top and down the right-hand side is the Dark Peak. Then we've got that orangey bit, the White Peak, and then the green bit, the South West Peak. And I think you can see that the projects are really well distributed across all 3 NCAs. Interestingly, this distribution hasn't changed over time. So, you know, we began distributing evenly, we're still distributing evenly. So in terms of the examples, in the report that you've got, we've got 2 appendices. The first one is sort of facts and figures on what we delivered last year. And then the second appendix from FIPL, which I think is Appendix 4, sort of tries to give some sort of qualitative description of what we're delivering. And both in that and for this today, I've split that up again, Dark Peak, White Peak and South West Peak. But today, talking about some different examples. So we're going to talk about farmer groups, cultural heritage, and then how we deliver on small holdings, which are increasingly important and valuable part of the delivery for nature and climate in the national park. So farmer groups in the Dark Peak. This is now quite a complex picture. And a very important picture in terms of delivery and in terms of bringing people together to deliver for all 4 of those FIPL themes. So I've just listed what we've got at the moment in the Dark Peak, and obviously there's other things happening elsewhere. So we've got the Bradfield Farmers Group. This used to be funded through DEFRA. The DEFRA RPA arrangements are now so complex that that has come out of that scheme, and we are now funding it directly through Farming in Protected Landscapes. There's Hope Valley Farmers, which is still funded through DEFRA. And then there's a new group that's come about in about the last couple of years called Peakland Environmental Farmers, which is supported by the Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust and their commercial arm, which is Natural Capital Advisory. But it's essentially a group of farmers and landowners in the Dart Peak and increasingly the Southwest Peak. We've supported them through FIPL in looking at how they can start thinking about green finance and bringing green finance into holdings in the national park. They've recently heard that they've got some funding from Heritage Lottery Fund to take that work further, and they're also applying to DEFRA for test and trials. The applicant in all these cases is GWCT, the NCA, but essentially this is a bottom-up approach, again, like the others. And then in Hayfield, often a sort of forgotten part of the national park, we're working actually through an organisation called Sustainable Hayfield to try and develop the idea of a farmer group. And we've got the first meeting on the 7th of February where we're looking at carbon auditing and trying to encourage farmers to come on board with looking at carbon auditing on their individual holdings. In terms of FIPL and outcomes, obviously one of the really critical things, and it's difficult sometimes to measure what this is going to deliver for FIPL outcomes, but one of the critical things is about increased understanding. One of our FIPL outcomes under the climate theme is actually about increased understanding about carbon and what that means for you as a farmer. So we are delivering directly for, we think, the FIPL outcomes, but it's about this increased understanding and awareness raising. Then the other critical thing that's come out of this is applications from individual farmers to FIPL to deliver stuff. And obviously those groups are also really good at getting out messages about the National Agri-Environment Schemes. Thirdly is this area-wide collaboration. Obviously farmer groups are all about collaboration. We've had 2 big applications which has looked at hedge creation, primarily in the Hope Valley but also in the Bradfield area. In the first year, the applicant was Hope Valley Climate Action, bringing together interesting collaboration between sort of environmental activists and farmers. And then this latter year, the application has been from Peakland Environmental Farmers. And this has delivered, you know, way over 8 kilometres of hedge creation in Hope Valley. Quite a significant achievement. This picture up here shows the hedge plants. It's a mammoth organisational task. All the hedge plants are donated by free from the Woodland Trust. They all come to Marsh Farm, so the Hope Showground thing, on one day, and they're divvied out. So there's farmers coming and going. Christine Harding, who works with Chloe Palmer on both those 2 farmer groups, is absolutely critical to this. And trees and the stakes and the spiral guards are divvied out amongst the farmers. It's quite an exciting event to be at. And then obviously the end result is hedges in the landscape and some volunteers delivering them. I'm just going to come back to the slide before very briefly. That picture at the top is actually Ross Dilks. Some of you may know him, talking to Hope Valley Farmers Group about soils. As well as the project fund, we have an advice and guidance fund and an admin fund for FIPL. And we use some of the advice and guidance fund to commission him to deliver an advice package for farmers on soils and what this can deliver for carbon and for nature. And then he's gone out to several of these groups to try and encourage them to put together soil management plans on their holdings. So again, whilst that actual event was funded by Hope Valley Farmers and through DEFRA, FIPL is behind making this happen. And again, I think that's a really interesting message. So moving on to the White Peak, and here, remember we've got over 300 agreements, we're just pulling out examples. I'm talking about cultural heritage. Kath Potter actually asked us for some data on cultural heritage delivery in the National Park. I had a quick whiz through again this morning because I couldn't remember it. But you know, there's somewhere in excess of 60 or 70 projects through FIPL, where cultural heritage has been one of the primary focuses, if not the primary focus. And we've looked at a whole range of things. So this first slide looks at traditional building restoration. There's 7 or 8 projects in the White Peak. So this first one on the left is Coatesville Pigsty, a listed building which is being restored through FIPL. That's actually owned by Chatsworth. The one in the middle is Standhill Field Barn, owned by a dairy farmer in Great Longston. Really interesting, that's got barn owls in it. As one of the things they obviously had to really be taken into account in how this building was restored. There were 2 external barn owl boxes put up, so the barn owls could move into the boxes, and then they were back in the building within days of it being finished, and successfully raised another brood this year. And then yard barns as well, so this is Brushfield Huff, again in private ownership. We've also, I would say, gone out of our way to look at cultural heritage features. So these have no real value to anybody commercially, but obviously really important in terms of delivering the special qualities of the national park. So here on the left-hand side is Tisterton Silo, a really odd building. Nobody really knows what it is. It's off Gag Lane, so the gated lane up sort of towards Thorpe, really visible in the landscape. And that will end up with a roof on it. That's come through planning committee a few months ago. The picture in the middle is the winding wheel at Magpie Mine, and then the picture on the right hand side is Pikehall Lime Kiln. I see these even more important than just the individual feature. It's about what those features tell us about the development of cultural heritage over time. So if you think about the winding wheel, it's not just the winding wheel, it's that story about lead mining in the Peak District. And then if you look at the lime kiln, this is the story about the history of agricultural practices and what people have done to actually make the landscape be what it is today. It wasn't we, it was the conservation architect put forward Minninglow Lime Kiln for an award. And interestingly, it didn't win the award for the lime kiln. It won the award for the story that told of cultural heritage in the Minninglow area. So it's about the contribution to the landscape, the contribution to the national park. And then the third thing, we've done a number of cultural heritage appraisals, and this is really live at the moment. We had 2 farmers, private farmers, who were interested in planting trees on parkland, little parklands. So this has come from the farmers wanting to plant more trees. Both of them little parklands that we wouldn't normally really think about in the national park. So one of them at Pictor Hall, there's a map up the top right there, which is just to the east of Buxton. And then the other one, which is part of Thornbridge. So this shows that bit there. So the bit of Thornbridge everybody thinks about is the bit to the south here. But actually the registered parkland extends north of the railway line. Here it's owned by Sheffield City Council, it's rented by the Coxes in Great Longston. And as I say, Pictor just there, and the picture down here, the beautiful picture, shows the picture of the parkland as it is now. So through FIPL, we've been able to fund a cultural heritage specialist to have a look at these parklands, and together with a tree officer here, it's actually one of our farm advisors who's worked on this, they've come up with a proposal that is in draft form at the moment for how we can plant trees and do other works to enhance those parklands. These are really complicated but quite concise and little pieces of work that will end up making a significant difference to that part of our cultural landscape. And I put this slide in just to show the detail. And this is what's there now. And then there's another plan on top of that of how we will develop it. And the next stage in this is to go out with the specialist, with the farmer, with our specialists, and look at what we take forward and how we phase that work and fund that through FIPL. Moving on to the Southwest Peak then. This is going to become a bit like a cinema in a minute. I'm just warning you. So get out your ice creams, your popcorn. This is Hillsdale Hall. When I introduced this, I talked about the importance of small holdings. And I think in this context, and there are many of these people, they have small properties, really difficult to access national agri-environment schemes. FIPL is an opportunity for them to develop their ambition. This is near Butterton, and he's taken this field. It's nearly 4 hectares. It was just a boring field. And he has developed this plan for what he wants to do with it. So he's opened up 2 field drains, tree planting, hay meadow restoration, hedges. And it's amazing. And hopefully this will work. So this is the drain opened up. Remember, this was just a pipe under the ground before. I won't play all of this. It becomes a bit boring after a while. But there you go. Isn't it exciting when the first water goes through? And then these show pictures of the green hay going on. So the hay meadow restoration here was done by collecting green hay from a species-rich site and spreading it at Hillsdale Hall. So this is collecting the green hay. So the tractor moves along, cuts the green hay, spews it into a wagon. And then this is it. And then this shows the tree planting either side of that open ditch. I think that's me. Oh, crikey. Sorry, we've got everything happening all at once now. And let me see if I can stop them now. There we go.
So, sorry, slightly over time, but some really good examples.
Yeah, it's all right, Sue, don't worry. Thank you very much. And Sarah and Rebecca, thank you for your presentations. And welcome, Ken. You came in just at the cultural heritage part, so obviously good timing. Yeah. No, I think this area and this theme is so huge and so wide-ranging and such a lot of detail in here. We could actually, as members, spend days hearing about this. But thank you to Rebecca and Sarah and Sue for giving us a short insight into what's going on there. There are a report in front of us, a sort of summary as well as some appendices, but this is now an opportunity for members to ask questions, to find out more, to seek clarification, to understand what they might wish to do so. So has anybody got anything? I've got some questions, which I'll save to the end, but has anybody got anything they'd like to ask? Right, we'll go for Andrew Gregory, then Ruth, then Simon. And then Charlotte. Andrew.
Thank you. Morning, everybody. I think really well, first of all, thanks for a great presentation and just the fact that there's so much commitment and enthusiasm coming through on this project. It's just absolutely fantastic. And so thank you. I suppose my thought, Chair, is just in terms of the deadline looming of March 2025. And I just wonder whether, to what extent, and this, something perhaps for Phil as well here, is what's the kind of, even like the mood music or the debate and the discussion that's going on with DEFRA about getting as much clarity and indication as possible ahead of that deadline to just try and make certain that this project is going to continue, because this whole business of government handing out in drips and drops money and then leaving it to the last moment before we know whether we're going to get any more. It's just so unsatisfactory when we've got such a good project here.
Thank you. Sue or Phil, I don't know which one would like to talk about DEFRA's plans.
Yeah, it's a big concern because, obviously the project officers will need to start looking for other jobs. It can be quite a classic with programme funding. There are live discussions going on right now. I'm very lucky to be representing the national parks with one other officer from the Yorkshire Dales and sit on the National FIPL Core Working Group. So those discussions are really confidential at this point. It's actively being looked at, but nothing is certain yet. And I think that's the problem still.
Yeah.
Yeah, what I hear through National Parks England, who do quite a lot of government engagement, is that FIPL is really the success story in the agricultural transition. And certainly there are, as I understand it, ministers who were initially sceptical about FIPL, who are now very much won over. And the talk is that it will form part of the new environmental land management scheme, but we don't know the exact details yet. So I think there's a quiet confidence that it will continue in some way, but whether that will continue in a way and with the timings that allow us to retain our amazing staff is a real concern for us.
Thank you for that question. Of course, not least, there may be a general election before April 2025 as well to factor in. There will be, and so what the implications are of that, we don't know. Thank you, Andrew. Ruth Swetnam.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question of clarification on the map that you showed of the distribution of the projects all across the Peak District. I noticed some were outside the boundaries of the National Park. Could you just clear that up for members as to why we have that?
So we have made a decision that we have agreed with our panel members that whilst we will focus inside the National Park, we will fund any project in any of those 3 national character areas, which takes us outside the National Park. And that we will fund any project even outside of those areas where it links to the national park and would potentially make the national park better. We have just developed a project with Macclesfield Wild, which is looking at willow tits all the way from Macclesfield into the national park. Now, the South West Peak National Character Area goes as far as Macclesfield. This project will actually look at sites even outside of there. But obviously, willow tits don't know the boundaries of the national park. And if we want to conserve the willow tits inside, we've got to do something about the willow tits outside as well. And that's just an example of why we're doing what we're doing, really.
Thank you. Simon Thompson.
Thank you. Some great projects here. My question is really around measuring the impact of these projects, because we're obviously facing financial constraints. So it's really important that we do allocate the resources that we have to projects that are going to achieve the maximum impact. And reading this, I mean, we've got very good data on inputs, you know, X kilometres of hedgerows planted, but actually there's rather limited data on outputs, what's actually being achieved in terms of nature recovery, and particularly the sort of multiplier effects rather than the direct impact of planting more trees. How is that actually creating sustainable nature recovery? So particularly with this looming deadline coming up, I got, I guess, 2 questions. Do we have baseline data? But more importantly, are we actually measuring the impact that we're having through these interventions? And do we know which interventions are having the biggest impact?
Can I ask Sue to answer that? Is that all right, Rebecca?
Yeah, you can come in if I forget anything, but I think it's a really good question. FIPL originally was 3 years, so we're pretty good at recording the clear outputs, but actually a lot of the outcomes will come a lot later on.
Yeah.
And there isn't the funding to do any baseline monitoring and then do post-monitoring. We hope to pick some of that up through the farm advice team if FIPL does come to an end, or hopefully some other way if we get some sort of extension or continuation of FIPL. And there's probably 2 or 3, I think, Rebecca, where we actually have done some surveys. So there's particular examples where we thought it was really interesting, you know, about options around radar management is one of that I'm thinking, where we've just put some additional work in that's been funded to try and get a sense where we thought there was actually the possibility of influencing some of the option management for particular habitats. So that's where we're at, I would say, in summary.
Thank you.
Can
Rebecca?
I just come in to say, actually on the application form, they ask you, so they're asking the farmer, how are you baselining what you're looking to do, and how do you plan on monitoring it into the future? Now, there is normally come up with some idea of the baseline, but none of us have a future. So as Sue said, that's about something outside of the control of this at the moment. But the DEFRA have obviously thought about this, and where I talked about the outcomes, that bar chart, those are the proposed outcomes. We have to record the proposed outcomes and what we think the delivered outcomes are. Now, that isn't quantified at all, but DEFRA obviously looking at that as well, those differences. So it's been well thought through. It's just that we're not actually very good at doing it, I'd say, or having the mechanisms to do it.
Thank you. Yes, yeah, you can. Yes, of course, yeah.
I mean, this was in the FIPL interim review. This is one of the criticisms that was very clearly made in the comments to that interim review. And there was a statement made that there's a lot of work going on trying to improve evaluation of these projects. Are we involved in that?
Yes, we are. So what DEFRA have been doing, and again, this has put quite a lot of pressure on all the FIPL teams for the 44 landscapes, is they're redefining how the reporting is done to them, particularly in terms of those outputs and outcomes. So that's, for us, we have the largest allocation of any of the 44 protected landscapes because of that original scoring that was done. So that's quite a lot of additional work to go back over those original projects. Yeah, it's difficult, I think, particularly because of its short-term nature. Thank you.
Thank you. Charlotte.
Thanks. It's just regarding nature recovery. It was really interesting to see it all, but I was sort of disappointed that one of the challenges wasn't brought up was tourism, because it's such a massive problem in Hope Valley, especially. And I was at Castleton Parish Council last night, and they're just at their wits' end, as are we, sort of nearer to Sheffield. The impact is massive because of cars everywhere, parking on verges. Verges make a prosaic bit of the landscape, but nevertheless, wild camping, the paths getting trashed. There's a cycle ride that they're trying to encourage with as many cyclists as possible, and they actually say, our mission, we're lucky to have the Peak District as our playground, and we want to share its trails, gravel paths and landscapes with bikes, with mountain bikes. This is what's, so I think we've got to look at the impact of tourism so much more. And farmers around Castleton, I was hearing they're having their walls knocked down by vehicles reversing into them to turn around. Farmers can't get access to their sheep because vehicles are parked. I recognise it's a honeypot site, and dogs off lead, disturbing ground nesting birds. I could go on for a long while. And then there's litter, which,
Yeah. Thank you, Charlotte. I mean, I think what you're pointing to are the range of our purposes and objectives can sometimes be conflicting. Sarah, I'm not going to ask you to reply to that because that's quite it's a wide issue to the park. But Phil or Sue, do you want to make some comments?
I'll ask if James, who wants
James, are you coming in supplementary to that before?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, I had another point, but I can put that on the back burner. I think the challenge for us with this particular scheme, then, I would suggest it's small advancements towards a more sustainable approach to tourism across the area. And I would say that in giving grants through the FIPL scheme to initiatives that promote enjoyment and understanding and access, can we encourage those to whom we give grants, including ourselves, by the way, to carry sustainable messages? Protect, look after the very thing that you're enjoying. So, I mean, there is no one big bang solution, Charlotte. I wish there was. There isn't. And it's a number of small approaches. But I think through the FIPL programme, when we're awarding grants for interpretive purposes and access purposes, wherever possible, if we can enhance the message that we're giving to say, you know, this is a delicate landscape, this is a precious piece of our cultural heritage, please understand and respect it. It won't solve all the problems, but I think through this particular initiative we could make some steps to improve
Thank
that.
you, James. I'll come back to your question in a minute. I'm just going to ask Phil to respond.
Yeah, Charlotte, recognise all of those. They're very real issues. And as James said, there's no one answer to them. So I think there's lots of little answers. And I would say I think we need to work on all of them. I think the main method of working we have is engage and explain. You know, rather than kind of sort of ban, you know, that's not our role. We don't have the powers. So what we do have is to bring people together, to work together collectively to engage and explain and try and change behaviour, because all of those things you've said really are around behaviour, and that's where I think we have a role to play.
Thank you. Thank you, Charlotte. James.
No, I'm sorry because I've interjected. I mean, my one question was, how does the FIPL money relate to the historic buildings restoration grant?
The cultural heritage.
Is it one and the same thing?
Okay.
So, restoration of traditional buildings can be part of FIPL. However, you're probably remembering, I can't remember the dates are in the report, we were one of 5 national parks that were running a countryside stewardship pilot for the restoration of traditional buildings. That finished, and the learnings from that, and this is quite heartening to see that the learnings for that have actually come forward, and DEFRA offered another pot, I think of 4.5 million, but for all those 44 protected landscapes, as additional funding for the restoration of traditional buildings through the FIPL process. And they're obviously taking those learnings further in terms of that wider environmental land management scheme. So I think that's just a nice example of how FIPL has influenced something, and hopefully there'll be another stage with another pot of money. The problem with the restoration of traditional buildings is that it's quite a long-term project. We say it's at least 2 years. Quite often it can include planning because there's some major works to be done, and they're very expensive. Thanks, Janet.
Thank you. I'd just like to bring a question from me now, please, which is to do with the DEFRA Elms scheme and test and trials and the Peak District National Park Authority being used to explore their hypothesis. Can I ask, I mean, this is actually fundamentally a really important thing for the Elms scheme nationally, but also as in the National Park, because it will allow us as a authority to basically be the people who help manage and deliver elms and the environmental land management funding for our farmers and land managers. Can I just ask, so it's fantastic that we're a pilot for testing out that process by which money is distributed. Can I ask the timescale on which they're likely to report, you have to report back, and also the likely, DEFRA's likely decision making on how when they're going to make a decision on how they distribute elms funds, because I'm aware that farmers have been sitting waiting for a long time to know what's going to happen and when.
So the timescale, it's initially it's a 1-year project which started in September, so finishes next September. We're doing this on behalf of all the English National Parks Authority, primarily because they wanted an upland national park, they wanted something with cross-boundary factors, which obviously we have with our Peak District factors Sarah mentioned earlier. There is another one going on with the High Weald in terms of a national landscape, and there are 3 others, I can't remember where they are, of various sorts, all with that same exploration. Slightly different to previous tests and trials that we've done is the evaluation doesn't come at the end. The evaluation is ongoing, so it's monitored and it's fed in. Consultants are working with us, and that is supposed to feed straight into DEFRA policy, and that's the way it's being set up. So hopefully it has the opportunity to influence policy changes sooner.
Excellent.
So that's the first time they've done it in that way.
Good.
So that'll be interesting. Decision making.
Okay. Following the same process as for decision making they have done to date. Lovely, thank you. I have got one more question, if you don't mind, if other members haven't, which is to do with the European Diploma for Protected Areas, which we're up for renewal for. This sounds like a very, very big deal to me, and hopefully we do get it renewed. Can I ask what the timescale is by which we're going to know that we've hopefully been renewed on this? And if so, if we do get renewed, are we going to make a bit more of this? Because this sounds quite important to me.
Janet, what I'd like to do is refer this to Rodri, who's at the back, Rodri Thomas, our team manager for Land and Nature, because Rodri has been instrumental in leading this review. Yep. Rodri, can you borrow a mic? There's one.
Yeah,
over
there's
there.
a mic between Ken and Simon, if you could just pop in there.
Thank you, Chair. The diploma is renewed every 10 years. We have to do an annual report, but there's a visit every 10 years, an inspection visit. We had an inspection visit from a couple of representatives from the Council of Europe in October last year. So they were here a couple of days and reviewed a number of initiatives that we're involved in. There's a meeting of the council towards the back end of February. I'm not sure the exact date at the moment. I think it's around about the 23rd, 24th of February. So a decision will be made then. The inspectors have submitted a report to the committee, and we've had the opportunity to comment on that. So I've seen a draft of that report, and it's a very favourable report which recommends renewal. So
Excellent.
I would be hopeful that it should be renewed.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Rodri. And please do let us know when you hear, hopefully, good news that it will be renewed. Okay, thank you. We've gone over time a little bit on this, but I think it's been really helpful to bring members up to speed on the huge depth and breadth of work that's going on in this area. We have a recommendation to note progress in delivery. Yes,
Before
sorry,
we
Ken.
just go to that, could I make one comment?
Okay, yes.
Thank you very much. It's extremely gracious of you. It's just that we had a champions meeting last week that I attended along with Ginny Priestley, with the National Environment Champion. And Ginny asked me to, because she doesn't attend this committee, to pass on, and I fully endorse her comment, her congratulations to our staff for the work that they've done in producing these outcomes, these outputs as well. And I just thought that it would only be appropriate for me to relay that to committee, and hope that committee endorse the efforts that have resulted in what's been presented today, albeit I missed most of it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Ken. Thank you very much for those comments. So, absolutely, to reinforce that, I mean, well, let's get the recommendation through and then I'll say what I think. So, can we have somebody to move the recommendation, please? I'll take Annabelle for that and Charles to second it. Can I have all in favour of the recommendation, please? Anyone against the recommendation? Anyone abstaining? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Landscapes and Engagement team. I mean, there is such a huge amount of work here, and reading these papers through before the meeting, I was buzzing with excitement about the work that's going on in this area. It was such a good news story, and there's such positive things happening here. Let's hope they continue and the progression continues. So thank you, everybody, for all your efforts. I know there's an awful lot going on in the background. Right, so a little bit late, but can we move on to item number 7, please, which is AMP 8, Landscape Scale, Peakland Restoration, Moors for the Future. It's fantastic. It's really, this is just brilliant. This is why I like being on time. Yes, they did well. It was a little bit longer than I was told it was going to be. I was told 12 minutes, and it's about 20. Okay, while they're setting up, can I introduce Christine as his role as Head of Moors for the Future, and Matt Scott Campbell, who's the Programme Manager for Conservation and Land Management. We see Moors for the Future decisions and information coming to programmes and resources quite a lot. And in the past, I've asked for the team to do quite a lot of context setting for us. We feel we're at the stage now where members know quite a bit about this. So I've asked Chris to keep this brief in terms of introduction, and so we can move into the substantive recommendations fairly swiftly. Thank you.
Noted, thank you. Does this still work if I stand up? Is that
Yes,
okay?
yeah.
I just prefer standing up, really. Means I can run away quicker if I'm standing up. Yeah. So we came to committee back in spring with our business strategy, and this sort of follows on from that. It's a really good news story. It's a big item, long awaited by us, and there's no call in this for National Park resources. So within the business strategy that we brought to you last spring, the number one priority action for fundraising for business development was the AMP8 programme, Asset Management Plan 8. It's the funding scheme that is open to water authorities to actually apply to Ofwat to put money on your water bills for things that they want to do to pay for improvements in their asset, basically. And one of their assets is their upper catchment, both owned and non-owned catchment. The 8 refers to, this is the 8th 5-year plan since the utilities were privatised. We cast about these letters and titles sometimes, and it's not that obvious what they mean sometimes. So I said that we would be returning with with asks for delegated function for major strategic areas of funding that would sit within that strategy, and this is one of those. Today we're seeking approval to engage with work with all 3 utility companies across the Most of the Future working area. We're seeking this 12 months early because this doesn't start until 2025, and we're doing that just to provide the confidence of committee approval to our officers that are having to carry on ongoing negotiations and putting a lot of staff resources into that to detail this, really. This is asking for delegated function to the partnership manager in consultation with the relevant other officers to a value of 15 million to 2030. We also believe it'll bring in more funding. What we've done with the asset management plan funds in the past, working with the water companies from 5, 6 and 7, is that we've used their fund as a match funding to then go and seek other funds, which the utilities have been quite happy for us to do. Members will remember that has meant 2 big life projects in the past. Obviously we've not got that this time, but we are looking at natural flood risk management, for which there is a pressing need. You'll all be well aware of all the rolling storms we've had over the past 2 months. That starts in the hills, so there's more that we can do in where the water's been supplied from. It ties in with water company works as well. They have a concern for that, so that will be one area that we're certainly looking for. I did have a short video just to emphasise the flood risk management stuff. We couldn't get it to play through the kit, so we will send you a link to that in due course, really. The map that we've got up, we can send this out as well, a link to this, because you won't be able to see it from where you're sitting, but basically we're just trying to give an account of the size and scale. So it will cover 2,000 to 4,000 hectares of land, both in the Dark Peak and in the South Pennines, the Most of the Future working area. And this is just an example of the types of work that will cover. We are waiting for final confirmation from Ofwat. So all 3 water companies have put their business plans in, and they're now waiting for approval. So this is what we think will happen, but we've got a pretty good idea it will, because this is what happened last time. There will be some changes to their business plan. They won't get everything they've asked for, but in the past they've got almost everything they've asked for in the upper catchment, because Ofwat see that as a priority, really. Work expected to start spring 2025, so we're really quite excited by it, really. There were questions from members on the last paper about continuity of funding, and this is our major continuity strategy beyond 2025, so it fits in with our business planning. I don't think there's anything else I need to say about that, Chair. I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. The recommendations are in front of you, which is really about approving engagement in these new projects and entering into contracts in compliance with procurement standing orders. Can I just ask Chris, before I open it to members for questions, is this the recommendations? Are we being asked to approve any new or different processes to ones we've done before with AMP7 previous approvals?
No, it's similar to what has happened in the past. I think one probably fairly minor but important difference is that, I think I mentioned it last time, the actual recommendation is one that we've landed upon for all of these sorts of delegated functions, so that there's some commonality between the way it's been done. So it's written to try and future-proof it. Yeah. So that's why it's got words in about or whoever is filling that post in the future type of thing, really. But it's the same working arrangement that we've had with the water companies for a long time, which has proved to be relatively easy to work with and relatively straightforward. The three of them are different in their approach. You might think that they're not, but they are. They're completely different in the way that they approach us, but we're used to their approaches, and we don't really see a problem with that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. It's just 15 million sounds a lot of money, so I wanted assurance that the process is one that we're familiar with in terms of the scale of these things.
Yeah, the funding has gone up with each AMP programme, which is good, positive, isn't it? So they've the water company officers that we deal with and Ofwat have recognised through the last AMP programmes the necessity to deal with issues at source rather than in water treatment works, which is good. So that's why it's more than it was last time.
Lovely, thank you. Open to members for questions or comments, please. Paul, please.
Thank you. I was on Saddleworth Parish Council a few years ago, which is up there, and when we had floods in October 2015, I was made flooding champion. So all this is very good news for the people of Saddleworth, I think. After I was made flooding champion, we didn't have any floods after that. So
you were clearly very effective then, weren't you?
For the 4 years that I was flooding champion, we didn't have any floods afterwards, but there have been floods since. And I think anything that resolves that problem, particularly in Greenfield, etc., in that part of Oldham Borough, is more than welcome. So more for the future is great for us, but so no, it's really just a comment rather than a question. But
thank you.
As it's something that, for once, that's something to do with the Peak District that's up in my area, I thought I'd make the comment and say it's a positive step forward.
Thank you.
I'm not sure about the increase on the bill now, but anyway.
Thank you, Paul. Simon.
It's a request. I mean, this is just a fantastic example of a successful project. I mean, 50 million, 20 years. I really struggled, though, just to get some headline stats on what's been achieved. Really sort of conversation points, because there's quite a lot of pessimism about these types of projects. It would be lovely to just have 4 or 5 key pieces of data on what we have achieved here so that we can talk to this project and the success of the project. Is it possible to circulate those?
We can certainly do that based around the work that we've done with water companies. There's a lot of information about More Life 2020, which was a match funded by the previous AMP programme, but we can certainly do that. The challenge is doing it in such a way that's not complicated.
Yeah.
So we can certainly look at doing that if that would be helpful to members. Yeah.
Yeah, I think if we look through past papers that have come to PNR and things like that, there's often progress reports and things like that. There must be some sort of key headlines from those, I think, is what you're looking for, Simon, isn't it? Yeah, that'd be brilliant. Thanks, Chris. Annabelle.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chris. Brilliant project. Always enjoy the updates on this one. I'm a finance person and I'm new to this committee, having come over from Planning Committee. As members, we have responsibilities to ensure financial governance is very sound. So I just wondered if you could quickly outline the financial governance arrangements for this, because it's a huge chunk of money even compared to the authority's total budget.
Yes, we can do that. I'm going to neatly sidestep it and pass it on to my colleague who hasn't had anything to do yet. So I'll pass that one on to Matt.
Thank you. Morning, committee. Yeah, it's true. There's a lot of capital outturn in our programme, and this year alone, I think the capital outturn is £4.1 million worth of restoration. And my colleagues and I at Moors for the Future obviously work entirely within standing orders to kind of manage that level of expenditure, ensuring that we're following the correct procurement and financial arrangements as well. We work with a lot of different sources of funding, as you know, and each of those has its own requirements a lot of times. So grant funding will have very specific financial setups that we have to work with in and above our own standing orders. We also work with, as per this arrangement, with private water company partners as well, and similarly we have to manage those carefully. So between our programme management, our project managers and our officer staff supported with programme office, there's a lot of focus on the financial side of it.
Do you want?
Can I just?
Yeah, you can have a supplementary.
Okay, so do all the finances for Moors for the Future go through the same controls and so on as? Are you using the finance team in the authority, or do you have a separate finance team?
We have a programme office team, so they're doing the project administration, and our project managers obviously work with those and our partners. But yes, the finance is through the authority, yeah, liaising with the colleagues here.
And is it included in the audit when the external auditors come in? Do they look at MFFP as well? Right. Okay, that's great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Charles, did you?
Thank you. Yeah, my question is also around the finances. But so through this programme, there'll be 6 million towards the wage bill over the 5-year period. Is that sufficient to cover the costs of Moors for the Future? Does it secure it? And of that 6 million, 1 million's allocated towards the overhead. So is this also then generating a modest surplus for the authority?
We are completely full cost recovery, so we have to get all our costs back. So we try to estimate slightly beyond where we need. So we've always got a little bit of a comfort cushion, because we can't do it the other way around. You know, we can't lose money at all. At the moment, those figures are an estimate because until the utilities get their business plans approved, we don't know what the final figure is. But members can be assured that we are obsessed with getting all of our costs out of these projects, particularly our staff costs, because our staff are the most important asset that we've actually got. So we've developed over the years a very good understanding about how much time it takes to do something. So we're able to set that estimation quite well. It seems to work. It's never come unstuck. You know, we've always been above in the terms of funds that we've actually needed. So it's working well. From a point of view of the corporate overhead, that's something which we just build into that cost model. Whether there's a surplus in that or not, that's really for the National Park to actually say. But we're certainly paying for everything that we require. So it's an income stream rather than anything else, really. I don't know whether that fully answers your question, Charles.
It does.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions from anybody? Sorry, Matt, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, if I could, I'd also just from a context perspective, where the staff cost is mentioned, I just thought I'd just highlight or remind members kind of what that is. Obviously, it's covering the staff cost, but the actual output of what the staff are doing is really central in terms of not just the kind of what's happening in the landscape. So there's a really vibrant communications and engagement program that runs alongside this work, and that's about helping visitors understand the sensitivity of the landscape and helping them be champions for nature recovery over those areas. And also there's really detailed monitoring that goes on from the baseline conditions on every site where we're working, so that we can evidence the benefits of what we're doing. And that's what Chris was saying before. I've made a note, by the way, about the headline achievements. Sometimes actually they're very complicated to get it into kind of a few bite-sized bits, but we'll look to that. But so when we see a staff cost, there is obviously a duty to make sure that the finances add up. But I just wanted to point out that they're doing really amazing things with those roles.
Thank you, Matt. Any further member questions? Okay, if not, can I ask for somebody to move these recommendations? Thank you. I'll take that from Andy, and a seconder, Charles. Thank you. All in favour of the recommendations for this approval of this funding? Thank you. Anyone against? Any abstentions? Now you've got a full house. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, members.
Thank you. I'd like to move on to item number 8, which is review of the occupational safety and health policy. After this item, we are going to have a short break. So just so I can manage your expectations. Thank you. And for this item, Teresa Reid, the Head of People Management, will be presenting this item to us. So over to you, Teresa.
Thank you, and I'll be brief so you can get your break. The Peak District National Park Authority is required to have an occupational safety and health policy by law. And we commit to review it every year to take into account any changed circumstances. The revised policy would normally come to the PNR in the autumn, but at that time we were still implementing the change from the decision in July to restructure. From the organisational restructure, there have been changes that impact on the policy. The new management restructure, we've now got a new senior management team, which is the Chief Exec and 4 heads of service. The policy gives clarity on where the strategic and the operational responsibility sits for health and safety in the new structure. The post of the chair of the Health and Safety Committee will rotate annually, with Phil Mulligan chairing the committee from April. The post of Occupational Safety and Health Advisor was disestablished as part of making the savings, and we are now working towards identifying and retaining an external health and safety consultant to provide that strategic and expert advice on a routine basis as and when needed. We aim to have this contract for service in place by the 1st of April.
Thank you. And so this is a revised occupational safety and health policy that has really been updated to accommodate the organisational change processes that have been taking place since last summer to enable occupational safety and health to be integrated into the management of the organisation. Any questions for Teresa? Charles, then Andrew.
Thanks, yeah. So at the moment, we're without somebody formally fulfilling the role. So are you picking up any issues that until the external consultant's appointed?
Yes, when we moved forward with this idea, it was on the basis that we have a level of competence already in-house. And so for the day-to-day operations, we have that capability. We also have a continued backup retainer of expert advice should we need it during this interim period.
Thank you, Charles. Andrew Gregory.
Thanks, Chair. So actually, Charles has asked my first question. So my second question is just about passes, because we had a test, I seem to remember, last year. And I remember that there was some missing people from the test in town. It was because people weren't using the pass in and out. So that gave me a bit of concern as a kind of how robust were these systems in reality. So what have we done, Teresa, in terms of just making certain that everyone's clear? Because obviously, God forbid there was a fire, we need to know where everyone is, don't we?
Yes, and I think the problem there was potentially tailgating, or perhaps some of the passes not working on some of the internal doors. So every time we have a fire drill, there's lessons learned, and that's communicated, and I'm aware that there'll be another test shortly. So again, we'll pick up and see how well that's worked.
How shortly?
I'm sworn to secrecy.
Okay, I hope you all swiped in. Thank you. Any other questions from members? Okay, thank you. Could we have somebody to move this recommendation, please? Andrew Gregory, seconder, please. Annabelle, thank you. All in favour of the revisions? Thank you. Anyone against? Any abstentions? Thank you, so that's approved. Thank you very much. Now, before you get out of your seats, thank you, everybody, I'd like to now move that we go into part B of the meeting before we take a break, please, so we don't have to do it at the beginning after we've had a coffee break. The next three items are all under exempt information. And so can I ask a member to move that we move to part B? Thank you, Ken Smith, seconded by James Beresford. All in favour of moving to part B? Anyone against moving to part B? Any abstentions? Thank you very much. So we're moving to part B.